hit that subscribe button, guys. You know, last night I was having a conversation with one of my friends, and we were talking about boxing. We were talking about Deontay Wilder. And as we were having this conversation, he said something. He said a comment that I thought was brilliant. He says, you know, Deontay Wilder is the best worst fighter I've ever saw. He said Deontay Wilder is the best worst fighter I've ever saw. And when he said that, like, I started laughing. I was like, yo, but that the way he phrased it, he's the best worst fighter I've ever saw. And that stayed in my mind for like a little bit, because as I was thinking about that, I was like, you know, he's right. Deontay Wilder is the best fighter we've all ever saw. Because when you look at Deontay Wilder, or when you look at any boxers, the first impression plays a part. You know, you ever like notice when you first watch a fighter? When you first watch a fighter, let's say you've never seen the fighter and you first watch him, you immediately judge the fighter based on what you saw. So if a fighter has a shitty night, that's your first impression of him. If a fighter, you know, is a very aggressive fighter and he destroys his opponent, you immediately think, okay, this guy is a, you know, destructor, a Mike Tyson 2.0. If you see a guy who is a defensive wizard, you immediately think, oh, this guy is, you know, a slick boxer. So when you first see Deontay Wilder and you see him in there, you know, very unorthodox, very ungainly, you know, throwing these wild punches, especially if you see him hurting his opponent and going for broke and he's throwing these, you know, windmilly punches. When you see that, the first impression you get is, oh man, this guy is very unorthodox. He's very amateurish. That's the first really impression you get. He's very amateurish. This guy's a champion. You immediately start thinking like that, because us as boxing fans, that's how we judge. We look at, like I said, we look at a guy and we immediately judge him at what we see. So when you see him throwing these wild punches, you immediately think, oh, this guy's just a bum. You start saying stuff like, this is the best heavyweight American has. And I noticed, and in my opinion, I think these are facts that us as boxing fans immediately, you know, judge a fighter off the first time we see them. Because look at Anthony Yarde. Anthony Yarde is a prospect with like 13 fights. And he hasn't fought anybody. He's been fighting nothing but bums. He's been fighting nothing but bums. But you look at Anthony Yarde's style, he's slick, right? He's pretty good defensively. And you read the comments, and you see people comparing Anthony Yarde to Floyd Mayweather Jr. You see people saying, oh, you know, this guy, he's the most defensive light heavyweight currently. Already people are comparing him to Mayweather, because at first glance they look at him and they judge him already. They're saying they see that he has that kind of shelly defense. They see that he's a defensive fighter. They see that he thinks about defense. So immediately they put him up there with the Mayweathers, you know, with the Roy Jones. Yet he's been fighting nothing but bums. Yet he's never tested himself. We don't know if he has heart. But immediately they start saying he's that, because, like I said, boxing fans immediately rate a guy off what they see on their eye test. So that's what a lot of boxers fans do with Deontay Wilder. They see how he swings. So, like, if Wilder was a slick fighter, they will be saying, oh, Wilder is the most slickest guy at heavyweight. But because Wilder, they see that bad technique from him, they just say he's the worst heavyweight. They say he's the worst heavyweight in America. And then they just dismiss everything. They dismiss the fact that he keeps winning. Like every time Deontay Wilder beats somebody, they only talk about his flaws. They only talk about his flaws. They don't talk about... It's kind of like Jarrell Miller. When Jarrell Miller... I've made many videos of Jarrell Miller. And every time I make videos of Jarrell Miller, I talk about his flaws. I talk about his strengths. I say, look at how good of an inside fighter is. You know, but every time I get comments from Jarrell Miller, it's always about his flaws. Oh, you know, he has no defense. He's fat. He's slow. And I'm like, why? And all they talk about is for some reason, people don't like Jarrell Miller. I think because they think he's a threat to Dillian White. And they know Dillian White will probably, Jarrell Miller will probably beat Dillian White's ass. So they perceive him as a threat. But one thing I noticed is people would only talk about the bad sides of Jarrell Miller. Oh, he's fat. He's slow. He's a slow plotting heavyweight. But I'll be like, don't you see the fact that at 300 pounds, he has the endurance to go 10 rounds nonstop? That's a positive. Don't you see the fact that, you know, that's in my opinion, a quality of Jarrell Miller? Don't you see the fact that he's a good inside fighter? Don't you see the fact that he knows how to mentally break fighters down? He doesn't wilt. You know, I always point the good sides. When it comes to Wilder, a lot of people only point the bad sides. They look at the windmill, look at the bad technique. You know, they don't look at the fact that he's able to compete with guys who are much more better skilled than he is, like Luis Ortiz. Luis Ortiz was much more skillful than Deontay Wilder would probably ever be in his entire career. He was way more composed than Deontay Wilder. He had a way better jab than Deontay Wilder. He had a way better stance than Deontay Wilder. He looked like he was miles ahead in terms of talent, but somehow Wilder's able to compete with him. Somehow Deontay Wilder is able to drop him, hurt him, you know, land that right hand on Luis Ortiz. And it's not by accident. He's able to do it. He's able to time Luis Ortiz. He's able to drop him. But people don't, it's like people turn a blind eye to that. They're like, oh no, he just got lucky. He's still a windmill. Yeah, he still has that bad, poor technique. But look at the positives too. Look at the fact that he's still able to land that right hand on these opponents. Look at the fact that he has amazing endurance. Deontay Wilder has better endurance than a lot of these heavyweights. Including Anthony Joshua. I actually think he has better endurance, way better endurance than Anthony Joshua. He doesn't gas out. I haven't seen him gas out yet. At least. They don't see the fact that, you know, he's able to take a punishment. He has heart. That's another thing. That's the thing that people underestimate about Deontay Wilder is his heart. He's a tough fighter. Again, I'm not saying he's unbeatable. He's going to lose one day. Especially if he only depends on his right hand. Or especially if the guy he fights never engages him. Like, let's say the guy he fights is constantly moving and it's all about defense, then yeah, that guy might inevitably beat him and win a decision. But what I'm saying is, you can't count Deontay Wilder out just because a lot of people just look at his skill set and they're like, well, this guy can't compete with Anthony Joshua. He can't compete with Joseph Parker. Yes, he could, because he couldn't compete in terms of skill set against Luis Ortiz, because Luis Ortiz was much better than him. Yet somehow he was still able to compete with him and drop him and stop him, if you get what I'm saying. It's going to be the exact same thing with Anthony Joshua. It doesn't matter if Anthony Joshua is much better talent than he is. That doesn't mean he can't stop or drop or hurt Anthony Joshua. Get that through your heads. People act like, Anthony Joshua has no flaws. What are you talking? He has flaws. People act like Joseph Parker has flaws. Why do you guys only focus on Deontay Wilder's flaws? All you guys do is focus on Deontay Wilder's flaws, his technique, how wild he is. Why don't you focus on Anthony Joshua's flaws, Joseph Parker's flaws? Like, they only focus on Wilder's flaws, and then they only point out the good side or the good qualities of Anthony Joshua. Why don't you be fair and not just focus on Deontay Wilder's flaws, but also focus on his good qualities as a fighter, and then let's not be biased and just focus on Anthony Joshua's good qualities and actually focus on his flaws, just like you do with Deontay Wilder. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous. People, especially people that don't like Wilder a lot, They just want to focus on his bad side. That's why I keep telling people, like, people think I'm one of these channels that, you know, is a hater. I'm not a hater. I'm not one of those channels that a hater. You know, I like to talk shit. I like to rattle boxing fans. I like to hype boxing fans. I like to keep it non-biased most of the time. There are times where I would criticize a fighter, but it's not because I don't like him. It's not because, you know, I'm not trying to give him credit. It's because of who this fighter has fought, how his career has panned out in terms of like the quality of opposition he's been in there with. That's why I've been clowning Wilder. It has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like him. That's why I'm starting to give him more credit. And if he does keep fighting other guys, I'll give him, you know, top heavyweights at least, I'll give him credit. But if Wilder were to, you know, downgrade and fight somebody I never heard of, I'll immediately start clowning him again. But as of right now, I'm not going to clown him. What's the point of clowning Wilder when he just fought a top legit dude and it was a tough fight? But that's the thing. There's some channels out there that they just will always bash Wilder. But I'm not like that because that to me is biased. That's really biased, and I don't think you go anywhere or progress anywhere as a channel if you just if you just focus on the negative of a fighter all the time. You have to focus, you know, there are times where you should criticize a fighter, like I have. I criticize Wilder, but there's also times where you should, you know, talk about the good qualities. That's why right now I'm talking about the good qualities of Deontay Wilder. Anyway, guys, if you watched the video from start to finish, as always, I appreciate it. And McGregor's out. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for boxing videos, guys. Daily boxing videos.